They say everything's bigger in Texas. Turns out, that includes the lies. The paper was already sweating when I found it. A yellow slip plastered to my front gate, edges curling in the noon heat. Trespass violation. $312 fine. Below that, my own name, my own address. I stood there in the sun, squinting at it like it might rearrange itself if I glared hard enough. I wasn't trespassing. I was tightening the fence I built with my own hands. Behind me, the pasture shimmered with heat, grass dry enough to crackle. Somewhere a dog barked. Somewhere closer, a camera clicked. That's when I knew it wasn't a mistake. The beginning of the line. Lone Cedar Estates isn't the kind of neighborhood that forgives loose boards. HOA rules thicker than a Bible, dues like tithes. Folks there like to say we bought a community. What we really bought was silence, the kind enforced by certified mail. I moved here 4 years ago, after my wife left for Houston. The house was cheaper than it should have been, the taxes low, the fences straight. All I wanted was a little land between me and the world. Instead, I got paper walls and watchful eyes. I peeled the notice off the gate. The signature at the bottom read, Linda Prescott, President, Lone Cedar Estates HOA. Her handwriting was sharp, like it knew where it cut. The first warning. That afternoon, I called the HOA office. A young voice answered. Syrup sweet, but trained. Good afternoon, Lone Cedar Estates Homeowners Association. How may I help you? This is Ethan Cole. I just got a trespass ticket on my own property. A pause, papers shuffling. Yes, sir. That would be violation 12B, boundary encroachment on common land. Common land? That fence has been there since the house was built. Yes, sir, she said again, the way you talk to a man holding a lit match. Per updated plats, that section now falls within HOA green space. Updated when? April 1st. Who approved it? Per the board vote, unanimous. I almost laughed. April 1st. Perfect day for a joke that cost you $300. The board. I showed up at the next board meeting. They held it in the community clubhouse. Cold air, hot coffee, 15 folding chairs, and a dozen neighbors pretending this was democracy. Linda Prescott sat at the center, pearl necklace glowing under LED lights. When my name came up on the agenda, she smiled like a dentist. Mr. Cole, you're here about the trespass notice? Yeah, I said. You fined me for working on my fence. Her smile didn't move. Actually, Mr. Cole, you were standing on common property when you did so. Common? It's my yard. The board recently adjusted lot lines to reflect accurate GPS data. That got a polite nod from the room, everyone conditioned to believe maps more than memory. I slid my own survey across the table. This line hasn't changed since '98. She didn't even look. The board's decision stands. Any appeal must be submitted in writing within 10 days. Then she struck her gavel, yes, an actual gavel, and called for the next item, holiday wreath color compliance. The crack. After the meeting, a man in a ball cap caught me outside. Don't bother, he whispered. They did the same thing to my cousin on Cypress Drive. Ticketed him twice till he sold. Sold to who? I asked. He looked over his shoulder. To her brother's company, Prescott Development Group. The air felt thicker. The streetlights buzzed like hornets. The numbers. That night, I spread the notice on my kitchen table beside an old topo map from my survey days. Each lot marked with clean black ink. Then I noticed something odd. The citation number. #00327LC. I Googled it, found the same number posted in a local Facebook group. Another homeowner complaining about a trespass ticket last week. Same fine, same signature, same number. That wasn't a clerical error, that was a pattern. The Watchers. By morning, a white pickup idled across from my driveway. No logo, tinted windows, stayed there 20 minutes, then rolled off slow when I stepped outside. Later that day, I got an email from the HOA system. Second notice, failure to comply will result in legal action. It hadn't even been 48 hours. I laughed, but it came out hollow. In Texas, laughter dries fast. The realization. That night, I opened my old survey software, plugged in the HOA's updated lot coordinates from their website. The lines didn't match. They'd shifted every property edge by precisely 0.8 feet inward. All of them. A perfect ring of stolen land. Not enough to notice, enough to profit. I printed the map, circled the pattern in red, and stared at it until the ink bled. If what I saw was true, it wasn't just my yard they were trespassing on, it was everyone's.
The next morning, the air was thick enough to chew. Texas heat has a way of pressing against you, like it's testing whether you still belong. I stood by the fence with my coffee, staring at the splinter where I'd pulled the ticket off. The grass hadn't grown right there. The line looked sharper than I remembered. Too perfect, as if someone had drawn it with a ruler while I slept. I walked it again, measuring with the steps I knew by heart. 32 to the old mesquite, another 12 to the post near the mailbox. That fence hadn't moved in 20 years. My father used to say a man's property line was like his spine. Lose track of it, and you start bending for anyone. When I reached the corner, something caught the light. A small orange flag, new, jammed into the dirt. Survey Control, it read. The ink was fresh, the stake untouched by rain. The HOA hadn't mentioned any new survey. I knelt beside it. The coordinates were stamped along the plastic tag, but when I compared them to the ones from my original deed, they didn't match. Off by less than a foot, 8 inches inward, just like the others I'd found on the map. Someone had been out here in the dark, redrawing the world while the rest of us slept. A pickup slowed on the road behind me. I didn't turn, I just felt the weight of its headlights crawl across my back before it rolled on. The sound lingered longer than the truck itself. Back inside, I dug out the cardboard box marked coal surveying. Old habits die hardest. Even after I quit the company, I never threw the gear away. The laser measure still worked, battery half dead but serviceable. I set new markers along the property edge. Each ping confirmed what I already knew. The HOA map was lying. I printed both sets of data, mine and theirs, and laid them side by side on the kitchen counter. Lines that should have been parallel were drifting apart like continental plates. At the bottom of their version, in small gray font, was a reference number. Amendment 4B, Green Space Adjustment, filed by Prescott Development. I didn't need to guess who that was. I grabbed my keys and drove to the county records office. The road shimmered in the heat, mirages flickering like ghosts of water. Inside, the air conditioning hit me like a slap. The clerk barely looked up when I asked for access to the plat archives. HOA documents are public, I asked. She said, typing without enthusiasm. Which association? Lone Cedar Estates. That got a pause. She frowned, tapped a few keys, then turned the screen slightly toward me. Strange, she said. Their digital file's locked. Needs county authorization. Locked how? New security protocol. Only someone on their board can request access. I laughed under my breath. They draw the maps, then guard them. She hesitated, then lowered her voice. There's still paper copies in storage, basement level, if they haven't been converted yet. I thanked her and took the stairs down before she could change her mind. The basement smelled of dust and wet concrete, rows of flat files, metal drawers labeled in fading ink. I found the L section, then Lone Cedar. The drawer squealed open like it hadn't moved in years. Inside were maps, rolled, yellowing, edges brittle. The oldest dated back to 1999, the year the development broke ground. I spread the original out on the table under the flickering fluorescent light. The property lines matched my measurements perfectly. Then I pulled the most recent version. Same lots, same numbering, but the scale was fractionally altered, almost invisible to the eye. You'd only notice if you laid one map over the other. I did, aligning the corner markers. The shift glared at me like an open wound. Every boundary line nudged inward. 8 inches. Exactly. Not random. Systematic. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hall. I froze. The door at the top of the stairs creaked open, then shut again. Silence returned, but my pulse didn't slow. When I looked back at the table, the fluorescent light flickered once, twice, then went dark. A hum filled the air, the kind electrical transformers make before they die. I packed the maps fast, rolling both into my tube. The stairwell light still worked. I climbed out of the basement and didn't look back. Outside, the sun was blinding. The clerk was gone from her desk. A man in a city maintenance vest stood near the copier watching me with polite disinterest. But when I passed him, he muttered, "You should go home, Mr. Cole." I stopped. "Do I know you?" He smiled without warmth. "Everyone knows everyone in Lone Cedar." Then he turned away, leaving me with the echo of his boots. Back in the truck, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me out of that basement, something quieter than fear, but heavier. I drove home with the windows down, trying to drown the thought in wind and road noise. When I got there, a new email was waiting. Subject: Unauthorized access room 2B. Message: Mr. Cole, any further tampering with official HOA documents will result in immediate legal action. They knew where I'd been before I even parked. I looked out at the fence. The sun was setting behind it, the slats throwing long prison bar shadows across my yard. I realized I was measuring them too, counting the spaces between, as if numbers might keep me safe. I poured myself a drink, sat on the porch, and watched the light crawl up the wood until it disappeared. Somewhere in the dark, an engine started, then another. Dogs barked. I told myself it was nothing, but I also knew this. Lines on a map don't move by themselves. And the next time someone came to redraw mine, I'd be waiting with more than a tape measure. By the time I parked outside the community hall, the heat was already sliding off the pavement in waves. My palms stuck to the steering wheel. I told myself it was just another meeting, but the knot in my stomach said otherwise. The Lone Cedar clubhouse looked the same as always. White stone, manicured flower beds, a flag snapping lazily in the wind. From the outside, it promised civility. From the inside, it smelled like fear masked with air freshener. I walked past the sign-in sheet. Someone had already written my name in neat block letters. I hadn't even picked up the pen yet. Inside, the board sat on a raised dais like a miniature port. Folding chairs in rows, coffee and styrofoam cups, an American flag drooping in the corner. President Linda Prescott at the center, pearls catching every flicker of fluorescent light. To her right, the treasurer, Mark Benton, kept his head down, pretending to read the agenda. To her left, the attorney, Greg Harlan, checked his phone without looking up. I took a seat halfway back. Around me, the neighbors whispered. No one met my eye for long. Every conversation seemed to trail off when I turned my head. Linda rapped the gavel once. Item 7, property encroachment complaint, Lot 14B. Lot 14B was me. I stood, walked to the front. Ethan Cole, homeowner. I'm here to dispute the citation. Of course you are, Linda said, smiling in a way that didn't reach her eyes. You've already been advised that the fine stands pending verification of updated plats. I've brought verification, I said, holding out the original map. The line you claim I crossed hasn't moved since the subdivision was built. Harlan finally looked up. Mr. Cole, this is a homeowners meeting, not a deposition. Then why am I being tried like one? A few of the neighbors laughed under their breath, nervous, not amused. Linda's smile hardened. We're here to maintain order, not encourage hostility. I laid the map on the table anyway. These are county-verified measurements. Whoever drew your new plat shifted every property inward by 8 inches. That's theft, not maintenance. The room went quiet. You could hear the ceiling fan click each time its blade passed the light. Harlan leaned forward. Mr. Cole, do you understand the implications of accusing your elected board of criminal behavior? Do you understand the implications of taking land that isn't yours? Linda tapped the gavel again. We're not going to entertain conspiracy theories. She turned toward a man in the corner. Security, maybe, maintenance. Please ensure Mr. Cole remains seated. I didn't move. You can throw me out, but you can't erase the county records. I checked them. That got her attention. For a half-second, the mask slipped, then she smoothed it back on. Records have been updated to reflect new survey data. Our developer donated the additional footage to improve storm drainage. You should be grateful. Funny, because the developer happens to be your brother. The room erupted in a low murmur. Someone coughed to cover it. Linda's eyes flicked to Harlan. Greg? He nodded once and rose to address the crowd. For everyone's clarity, there is no conflict of interest. Prescott Development simply assists the HOA in maintaining property value. Any allegations otherwise could be considered defamatory. Defamatory. There it was, the legal blade under the smile. I picked up my map, folded it carefully. Then consider this my formal request for the GPS data that justifies the change. Linda's voice softened, sugar-sweet. Of course, submitted through proper channels. I tried. The file's locked. Then perhaps the system knows better than you do, she said, still smiling. The laughter this time wasn't nervous. It was obedient. I walked back to my seat, pulse hammering. The walls felt smaller, the air thicker. Every board member's pen scratched the same note in unison, as if rehearsed. I realized then that this meeting wasn't for discussion, it was for documentation. Proof that they'd given me my chance to speak before proceeding. After the agenda moved on to landscaping contracts, I stood quietly and slipped out. The hall clock read 7:42 p.m., sunset outside, a perfect time for erasing shadows. Halfway to my truck, a voice stopped me, Mark Benton, the treasurer. His shirt was damp, collar wilted. Mr. Cole, you shouldn't push this, he said, glancing back at the doors. I just want what's mine. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. That's the problem. Around here, no one owns anything outright. It's all paper on paper. Then why keep the job? I asked. He hesitated. Because paper pays better than dirt. Then he stepped closer, lowered his voice. Check your mailbox tomorrow. You'll find something you're not supposed to. Before I could ask, he turned and went back inside. That night, I sat on the porch with the lights off, watching the street. A golf cart rolled past, the HOA patrol, its headlights sweeping the fences. The driver didn't look up, but the beam lingered on my house longer than the others. When it was gone, I let out the breath I'd been holding. On the table beside me, the trespass notice lay folded to the size of a playing card. I kept flipping it between my fingers like a coin I couldn't spend. At dawn, the sound of metal against metal awoke me. I stepped outside to find my mailbox door hanging open. Inside was a plain envelope, no return address. The paper inside looked official, HOA letterhead, same formatting as the ticket, only this one wasn't addressed to me. It was a copy of a citation against a different homeowner on the next street. Same fine, same citation number. Someone on the inside wanted me to see it. I looked down the road. The neighborhood shimmered in the morning haze. Lawns trimmed, sprinklers turning, flags waving. From a distance, it all looked perfect. Up close, you can smell the rot beneath the paint.
They call it community, but community means control when the wrong people hold the pen. And I was just starting to realize how many hands were writing my story.
The day after the board meeting, the air felt strange, quiet, heavy, like the neighborhood was holding its breath. The sprinklers still clicked in perfect rhythm, dogs still barked behind fences, but every sound seemed rehearsed, a little too normal. I kept expecting someone to step out from behind a hedge and hand me another citation just for existing. I hadn't slept much. The map tubes were still leaning against the kitchen wall where I had left them, accusing me each time I walked past. Coffee did nothing. Even the sky looked sunburned, bleached of color. Around 10, I heard a soft knock on the side gate. Not the front door, not the mailbox, just 3 careful taps on the wooden slats. I opened it to find Mrs. Halloran, my next-door neighbor. She was in her 70s, short, always wearing a wide-brimmed hat and gardening gloves no matter the season. Her husband had died years ago, but she still mowed her own lawn because the HOA charges more to ruin it. She held a small manila envelope in one hand and a trowel in the other. "Morning, Ethan," she said, eyes darting past me toward the street. "You got a minute?" "Sure. You okay?" She smiled, but her hands trembled. "Never better. I just thought you might need this." She pressed the envelope into my palm. It was thin but heavy with folded paper. "Keep it somewhere safe. Don't show it to anyone at the office." "What is it?" She looked over her shoulder again before answering. "Records. From before Linda took over. I used to keep minutes when her mother ran the board. You might say I forgot to turn everything in when I retired." I started to open it right there, but she laid her gloved hand over mine. "Not here. Cameras on the clubhouse catch this angle of your yard. They added them after that pool fence incident." That made me pause. "You mean they can see our yards?" "They can see what they want to," she said. "You didn't hear that from me." For a second, we just stood there, the sound of cicadas filling the silence. Then she straightened her hat and nodded toward her house. "You didn't get this from me either." When she left, I went inside and locked the door before opening the envelope. Inside were photocopied invoices, faded meeting notes, and a few glossy aerial photos taken before the neighborhood even had trees tall enough to cast shade. The earliest date was 2005. Most of the pages looked routine: landscaping bids, pool maintenance, contractor disputes, but one column kept reappearing across the years: lot line adjustments. Each notation had the same initials beside it: LP, Linda Prescott. In one of the older memos, a handwritten note read, "All boundary fees transferred to Development Fund. See Greg for legal cover." Greg Harlan, the attorney. The air in the kitchen went still. I could almost hear my pulse in the quiet. I flipped to the back of the stack and found a faded blueprint labeled Phase 2 Expansion Proposal. The lots were renumbered, cul-de-sac reshaped, but the fence lines, the real ones, were identical to the current ones. The green space Linda talked about didn't exist. When I lifted the final sheet, a Polaroid slipped out of Mrs. Halloran at a picnic table with 3 men in polo shirts, all of them smiling, a banner behind them reading Lone Cedar HOA, Founding Board. One of the men was the same developer who'd threatened me weeks later, Daniel Prescott. I called her right away, but she didn't answer. I tried again an hour later. Still nothing. Her car was gone when I looked out the window, the curtains in her house drawn tight. That evening I heard footsteps on my porch. I flicked off the light and watched through the blinds as someone bent over my mailbox, sliding something inside. When the figure walked away under the streetlight, I saw the white HOA patrol badge on his sleeve. Inside the mailbox was another notice,
No ticket this time, just a reminder about unauthorized communication with HOA staff. The words "final warning" were underlined twice in red. I sat down at the kitchen table, spread Mrs. Halloran's documents beside the notice, and stared until the words blurred together. Somewhere in those pages was the reason this entire neighborhood felt haunted by paperwork. Later, when the cicadas finally quieted, I saw her porch light flip on across the street. For 1 second, a shadow moved behind the curtain, then the light went out again. I told myself she was fine, that she just didn't want trouble, but deep down I knew better, because people here didn't vanish. They were erased, line by line, until the record said they never owned anything. Voiceover close. In Lone Cedar, the fences don't keep you safe. They keep the truth from wandering off.
Morning came with the smell of dust and sun-baked asphalt. I hadn't slept more than a few hours. My head kept replaying Mrs. Halloran's papers, those initials repeating like a drumbeat. LP, LP, LP. Every corner of Lone Cedar had her handwriting on it. I drove into town before the heat settled in, old survey tube on the seat beside me. The county archive sat behind the courthouse, a low limestone building that looked older than anything else around here. Inside, the air smelled of toner and mildew. A clerk at the counter waved me toward the back where public files were stored. "Help yourself, Mr. Cole. We just got the latest plat updates this week." I laid my map on the table, smoothing out the curl. The lines I'd drawn for my property still made sense, square, honest. But the newest official print showed the same slow drift inward, 8 inches on every lot. Someone had fed the lie straight into the county records. I asked the clerk when they'd received the update. She checked the log and frowned. "Funny," she said. "There's no sender listed. It just appeared in the transfer folder overnight." That was all I needed to hear. I took a few quick photos with my phone, rolled up the copies, and left. The drive home felt longer than it should have. Every intersection light turned red as I reached it. Halfway back, a fire truck screamed past, heading toward town, siren bouncing off the dry fields. I didn't think much of it until I saw the column of smoke. The courthouse district looked like someone had poured ink across the sky. By the time I reached the edge of the block, half the archive roof was gone. People stood on the sidewalk watching paper lift into the air like white birds. A firefighter shouted for everyone to stay back. I caught the clerk's face in the crowd. She was crying, hands black with ash. I asked what happened. She said, "Electrical short. Started in the records room." Electrical. The same word they'd used last time, something inconvenient burned. I could see fragments of maps drifting past, the very plat sheets I'd just been studying. One landed near my boot, edges singed. I picked it up before anyone noticed. The corners still showed part of the development logo, half melted but readable. Prescott Development Group. I folded it and slipped it into my pocket. Back home, the neighborhood was strangely calm. Lawns glistened under sprinklers, the sound masking everything else. My phone buzzed with an email from the HOA. Subject: Important notice. Records maintenance incident. Body: Due to unforeseen circumstances at the county facility, several property files may be temporarily inaccessible. Please refrain from independent surveys until further notice. I read it twice, feeling the anger settle into something colder. They hadn't even waited an hour. Inside the house, I spread the burned corner of the map on the counter. The edges flaked like old paint, leaving black dust on my hands. I zoomed the photo on my phone, matching the surviving lines to my own chart. The coordinates lined up perfectly. Proof that the HOA's new data came straight from Prescott's office, not the county. The evidence was gone in the fire, but the pattern still lived in my camera. As the sun dipped, I sat on the back steps watching the sky fade to rust. The cicadas started up again, relentless. Across the street, Mrs. Halloran's curtains were still drawn. Her porch light flicked on, off, on.
3 short blinks. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe a signal. I didn't know anymore. I told myself I'd go over in the morning, check on her. Tonight, I needed to save what I had. I uploaded the photos to 3 different cloud drives, printed copies on my old inkjet, sealed the burned scrap inside a plastic sleeve. Paper, pixels, smoke, every version I could think of. When I finally stepped outside to dump the ash into the bin, the wind caught it and blew it across the yard. For a second, the flakes shimmered in the porch light, little stars falling into the dark. I whispered to no one, "You can burn the maps, but you can't burn the ground." The words sounded foolish, but they steadied me. Tomorrow, I'd start tracing who signed those updates. And if the trail led back to the board, I'd make sure every homeowner in Lone Cedar saw it.
Downtown Austin looked like money dressed up as concrete. The law firm occupied the 12th floor of a glass tower that reflected the sky so perfectly you couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Inside, the air smelled of carpet glue and confidence. The receptionist didn't ask my name. She already had it written on a notepad. "Mr. Harlan will see you now." Her smile was the same kind they teach at HOA seminars, warm enough to hide the lock behind it. Greg Harlan's office was big enough to host a church service. Framed degrees lined the walls, each with heavier fonts than the last. A single cactus sat on the window ledge, the only thing alive in the room. He stood to greet me, tailored suit, silver hair, hand extended. "Mr. Cole, I've been expecting you." "Funny," I said. "I didn't make an appointment." He motioned toward the chair across from his desk. "Around here, we prefer to stay ahead of the schedule." I stayed standing. "You work for the HOA?" "With the HOA," he corrected. "I provide guidance, compliance law, zoning disputes, that sort of thing." "And property theft?" That earned a small laugh. "You've got fire, Mr. Cole, but words like theft carry weight. I'd advise choosing them carefully." "I've got proof those files came from Prescott Development, not the county." He leaned back, folding his hands. "Prescott Development and the HOA share a beneficial partnership. Improvements, drainage maintenance, value protection. No one's hiding that. They're hiding ownership." Another small laugh. "Do you know how much of Texas sits under developer-managed trusts, Mr. Cole? 90% of suburban growth in this state is managed through land adjustments. You think you've uncovered a crime. What you found is a business model." He said it so casually that for a second I forgot to breathe. "So what happens to homeowners when the adjustments push their fences onto company land?" "They sign easement renewals, or they sell. Either way, value circulates. Everyone wins. Except the people losing ground. Those people," he said softly, "usually learn to adapt, or they move." I finally sat down, mostly so he wouldn't see my hands shaking. "Is that what happened to the others who got cited? They adapted?" He looked out the window at the skyline. "Lone Cedar is a prototype. If it runs smoothly, more communities will adopt the model. It's efficient, predictable, clean." "You mean profitable." He turned back to me, smile fixed, but eyes cold. "You're an intelligent man, Mr. Cole. You must realize there's nothing illegal about any of this. The board acted within its charter. The city approved the filings, and you just got caught standing on the wrong side of progress." I wanted to tell him progress didn't need to steal inches from a man's backyard, but the words caught somewhere behind my teeth. He opened a drawer and slid an envelope across the desk. "Consider this a goodwill gesture, enough to cover your fine, plus compensation for the inconvenience." I didn't touch it. "Is that a bribe?" "A settlement," he said smoothly, "and a chance to move forward. The world is full of bigger fights than fences, Mr. Cole." "And what if I don't take it?" His smile widened. "Then you'll keep getting letters, fees, maybe even a lien. Paper can bury a man faster than dirt." For a moment the room felt colder. The city outside looked distant, unreal through the tinted glass. I stood, leaving the envelope where it sat. You think paper makes it right. He straightened his tie. I think paper makes it legal. I turned for the door, but his voice followed me. Just so you know, Mr. Cole, your neighbor, Mrs. Holloran, lovely woman, she's been behind on her dues. It would be a shame if she lost her home over a clerical issue. I stopped, hand on the knob. Is that a threat? An observation. I walked out without another word. The receptionist's smile hadn't changed when I passed. Downstairs, the heat hit me like a wave. The envelope's image stuck in my mind, the way it had waited on the desk like bait. Driving back, the radio droned about traffic on I-35 and an incoming heat advisory. Ordinary noise for an ordinary world, but I could still hear his voice under it, soft and certain. Paper can bury a man faster than dirt. Back home, the mail was waiting. Another HOA envelope, another warning about non-compliance. I tore it open just to hear the paper rip. The words were the same as before, but this time they carried his smile with them. I poured a glass of water, sat on the porch, and watched the sun slip behind the fence line they'd tried to move. My hands were steady again, but my mind wasn't. Voiceover. They call it property management. I call it quiet theft. But I'm learning. Around here, the law doesn't care who owns the land, only who writes the paperwork.
The diner sat at the edge of the frontage road, caught between the last gas station light and the dark of the open highway. A place that smelled of coffee, fry oil, and secrets that nobody wanted to keep at home. I liked it because no one ever looked up when the door opened. People came here to disappear for a few minutes. I took a booth near the back facing the door. The waitress filled my cup without asking, the kind of mercy you don't have to explain. The coffee was bitter enough to feel honest. She walked in 10 minutes later, young, mid-20s maybe, hair tied back, city badge clipped to her purse. I recognized her from the county office, the one who had looked at me too long when I'd asked about access to the plat files. She spotted me, hesitated, then came over and sat down without a word. "Rosa Vega," she said finally, voice low. "You shouldn't use your real name on the sign-in sheets." "I'm old-fashioned," I said. "You said you had something." She slid a flash drive across the table wrapped in a napkin. "Not here. Plug it in somewhere offline. It's copies of the zoning submissions from your HOA. You'll see what they changed." I looked at the napkin, but didn't touch it yet. "Why bring it to me?" She took a long sip of her soda, eyes on the window. "Because I can't take it to my boss. The changes came through our internal queue, but the authorization code isn't county. It's corporate, Prescott Development. Somebody gave them access credentials months ago, and the same code signs every correction that came through after." That explained a lot and nothing at once. "You're sure?" She printed the metadata before it vanished, she said. "Our system logs show upload times between midnight and 3 a.m. Always the same pattern. I thought it was maintenance at first, until I saw the coordinates shift the same direction each time." I finally took the napkin and slid it into my pocket. "You know they'll trace you if they find out you copied this." She smiled faintly. "They'll think it's you. The access ID points to your parcel number." I felt the weight of that settle in my stomach. "They framed me." "They framed a lot of people," she said. "Yours is just the cleanest example." We sat in silence while the waitress refilled our cups. The jukebox coughed up a country song about promises and long roads. Nobody listened. I asked, "Why risk this? You don't even know me." Rosa shrugged. "Everyone thinks public records are just numbers, but numbers decide who keeps their home. My aunt lost hers 2 years ago because her HOA said her porch extended 2 feet into common space. That common space is a parking lot now." Something in the way she said it, flat, practiced, made me realize she'd rehearsed this story for herself, not for me. Outside, headlights rolled past, throwing short shadows across the diner. I could see my truck reflected in the window glass, a small square of normal life that didn't belong here. She pulled a folded printout from her bag and placed it on the table. "That's the approval chain. Each digital signature is supposed to come from a verified county official, but checked the third one, C. Harlan. Sounds familiar? I didn't need to look. Greg. He's listed as legal counsel for Prescott. He shouldn't even have access credentials, but the system doesn't know the difference if the credentials test green. So the whole thing's digital, I said quietly. No paper trail to burn. Rosa nodded. That's why they moved everything online this year. We talked for another half hour, her voice never rising above the hum of the lights. She explained how she'd tried to flag the anomaly and was told to focus on service metrics. She'd started saving the nightly sync logs, tucking copies onto personal drives. The last one, she said, disappeared from the server yesterday. Someone deleted it? Or archived it somewhere I can't reach? I asked what she wanted me to do with what she had given me. Make noise, she said, the kind that doesn't vanish. When she left, she didn't look back. The waitress came by with the check and an extra slice of pie on the house. I think she felt the weight in the air, too. Back in my truck, I held the napkin-wrapped drive like something radioactive. The plastic felt hot even through the cloth. I drove until the city lights disappeared behind me, pulled over at a rest stop, and plugged it into my old laptop. Offline, no signal, battery only. Files opened one by one. Maps, audit reports, internal memos. Each document carried the same digital fingerprint, C. Harlan-01. The timestamp format was consistent, UTC-5, same as our local time. They hadn't even bothered to hide it. Then, near the bottom of the directory, a folder labeled Phase 3 Acquisition, dated 3 months in the future. I opened the first file, a plan showing the entire subdivision converted into commercial parcels, residents relocated under non-renewal of membership clauses. It wasn't just a scheme. It was a schedule. I sat there for a long time listening to the cicadas outside the truck, the wind across the lot. I felt the kind of anger that doesn't need shouting, the kind that builds quietly, waiting for a place to land. I ejected the drive and slipped it into my pocket beside the burned scrap of map. 2 pieces of the same story, one written in ink, the other in code. When I turned the key, the dashboard clock blinked midnight. I drove home without music, headlights cutting narrow tunnels through the dark. Every mailbox I passed looked identical, white, clean, harmless. But I couldn't stop seeing the line underneath them, shifting inch by inch, erasing everything people thought they owned. Some truths don't hide in shadows, they hide in plain sight, behind login screens and smiling lawyers. You don't dig them up. You log in and watch the numbers move while everyone else sleeps.
The courthouse smelled of paper and old air conditioning, like everything that ever happened here had been filed and forgotten. I'd been in a few hearings before, back when I worked survey disputes for the county, but never as the one in the chair marked defendant. The metal was cold even through my shirt. Across the aisle, the HOA board sat together like a church choir. Pressed clothes, polite smiles, eyes that wouldn't quite meet mine. Linda Prescott in the middle, pearl necklace again, her brother's developer pin on her lapel. To her right, Harlan looked relaxed enough to be bored, scrolling through his phone. The man could weaponize indifference. The judge came in, gavel already raised. Case 21-145, Lone Cedar Estates versus Ethan Cole. His voice had the rhythm of repetition. This was routine to him, only the names changed. The bailiff read the complaint. Trespass, violation of community boundaries, refusal to comply with corrective measures. I could hear the words, but not their meaning. They'd turned my life into a paragraph. When it was my turn, I stood. My palms left damp prints on the table. Your Honor, the citation was issued on altered property data. I have evidence that the boundary maps were redrawn after the date of the ticket. Harlan didn't look up. Objection, Your Honor. The defendant is speculating. The judge nodded almost before he spoke. Sustained. Mr. Cole, keep to facts. Those are the facts. A whisper of laughter drifted from the gallery. I recognized a few neighbors, there to see the show. I wondered what story they'd been told about me. Harlan rose, buttoned his jacket, and approached the bench with that slow confidence lawyers buy with billable hours. Your Honor, the HOA's survey records were verified by the county and accepted into evidence. Any claims of tampering are unfounded. I wanted to shout that the county files had burned, that the signatures were digital ghosts, but the judge was already nodding again. From the back row, movement caught my eye. Rosa. She'd come after all, wearing a gray hoodie and oversized sunglasses, blending in with the spectators. When our eyes met, she gave the smallest nod and slid an envelope along the bench to the bailiff's table as if she dropped it by mistake. Harlan noticed. His jaw tightened just enough to break the mask. The judge glanced toward the envelope. "Counsel, what's this?" "Additional exhibits, Your Honor," I said quickly. "Filed under discovery." He sighed, motioned for the bailiff to bring it forward. Inside were 2 printouts, timestamp logs from the zoning server. I'd seen them on the flash drive, metadata showing the boundary updates created after my ticket date. Harlan skimmed the pages, then smiled faintly. "Your Honor, these appear to be unofficial copies. No verification seal, no chain of custody. They could have been generated by anyone with a computer." He handed them back with surgical precision. The judge barely looked at them before placing them aside. Without verification, the documents are inadmissible. That was it. All that risk, all that proof, turned into paper nobody wanted. Rose's hands were clenched in her lap, her face unreadable. When the judge read the decision, fine upheld, compliance required, I didn't feel angry. I felt hollow, like the sound a fence makes after you pull one nail too many. As people filed out, Linda caught my eye. "Maybe now we can all move forward," she said sweetly. I leaned close enough that only she could hear. "Forward to where?" She smiled. "Wherever the map says." Outside, the heat hit like a slap. The sky was too bright, too clean. Rosa waited near the steps, head down. "I'm sorry," she said. "They were supposed to authenticate those logs." "They won't," I told her. "Not while the board writes the definitions." She handed me a small flashcard. "This one's different. It's the raw server cache. No signatures, but it can't be faked. If you release it online, people will see the pattern themselves." I turned the card over between my fingers. "And if they come after you?" She shrugged. "They already have my name on the audit trail." A siren wailed somewhere downtown, echoing off glass. We both looked toward it, but said nothing. When she left, I sat on the courthouse steps, watching cars slide past, each one a tiny reflection of normal life. I thought about the judge's gavel, the way it sounded like a closing door. They call it due process, but the process was due long before I ever walked into that room. In Lone Cedar, truth isn't what you prove, it's what the paperwork allows. I slipped the flashcard into my pocket and started walking. If the courtroom was their map, I'd need to find another way off the page. The night I decided to post the files, the air outside felt electric, one of those still, heavy Texas nights when the wind holds its breath. I'd been staring at my laptop for hours, the flashcard Rosa gave me sitting on the desk like a detonator. It wasn't courage that made me move, it was exhaustion. Every door I'd tried to open had locked itself from the inside. The courtroom, the board, the county, they'd built a system where truth wasn't lost, it was filed away. So I plugged it in. The drive lit up, and my screen filled with folders. Phase 3, easement adjustments, compliance logs. I opened one at random. Emails between Greg Harlan and Linda Prescott. The language was polite, professional, and soaked in greed. Confirm all boundary changes approved as administrative maintenance to avoid title conflicts. Another line read, ensure notices are staggered to reduce visibility. Optics are key. That was their crime. Right there, casual and calculated. I copied everything, zipped the folders, and wrote a short note to go with it. Subject, the truth about Lone Cedar. Message, if they can redraw our property lines, they can erase anyone. Spread this before it disappears.
I sent it to a few news tips inboxes, a real estate blog, and an online HOA reform group. Then I uploaded it to a public drive and hit share. The screen froze for a half second, the kind of pause that feels like eternity. And then it went live. A link on the internet. Unstoppable, irreversible. For a long moment, I just sat there watching the little blue upload bar vanish. The silence after was thick enough to feel like sound. Then my phone started buzzing. First, a friend from my old surveying job. "Dude, are you insane? You just went nuclear." Then another message, an anonymous number. "Take it down." By morning, the file had spread. Someone mirrored it to Reddit, another to a local news forum. The link reached Twitter, then a property rights blog picked it up with the headline, "Texas HOA accused of redrawing homeowner boundaries for profit." By noon, my name was everywhere. News vans rolled through Lone Cedar like vultures. I watched from my window as reporters interviewed neighbors, microphones catching fragments of fear. One man said he'd always suspected funny business with those fees. Another blamed me for bringing shame to the community. The HOA posted a statement within hours, something about maliciously altered digital materials designed to defame. Harlan's signature was at the bottom. I didn't answer the door when the first reporter knocked, or the second. I just sat in the dark with the TV flickering, showing my own house in the background of a news shot. Around sunset, my power flickered. Once, twice, then out. The entire block stayed lit except for mine. I stepped outside. The air smelled faintly of ozone and cut grass. Down the street, the HOA patrol cart sat idling near the corner. The driver looked at his phone, but not at me. When I went back inside, my laptop screen still glowed on backup battery. A notification popped up. An email, no sender name, just a subject line. "You shouldn't have done that." No body text, no signature, just that. I shut the lid, unplugged everything, and sat there, listening. The sound of sprinklers, a car door slamming somewhere distant. Then, nothing. Later that night, I heard footsteps on gravel outside my window. Slow, deliberate. I reached for my phone, camera ready, but by the time I pulled the curtain aside, the street was empty. Only the motion light blinking across the fence line. In the morning, my mailbox hung open again. No envelope this time, just a folded page from the HOA newsletter, one sentence highlighted in yellow. Non-compliance will result in removal from community privileges. They were reminding me who still controlled the rules. By midday, reporters were parked outside my house. One shouted questions about whistleblower retaliation. Another asked if I'd fabricated digital evidence. I didn't answer. Words meant nothing here, only paper did. My phone rang again. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Mr. Cole?" Harlan's voice came through, calm as ever. "You've made quite the mess, but I'll make you an offer." "I'm not interested." "You haven't heard it yet. Prescott Development intends to file civil defamation. That's a 7-figure claim. But there's a path to peace if you publicly retract the leak." I almost laughed. "And pretend the files don't exist?" "They exist, but the public will forget them. That's the beauty of outrage. It burns fast." "Not this time." He sighed, the sound of patience wearing thin. "You're fighting a system built from signatures and bylaws. You think you're holding truth, but truth isn't what's real, Mr. Cole. It's what's recorded." The line went dead. I stood there for a long time, staring at my reflection in the black phone screen. For the first time, I felt something heavier than fear. Resolve. I turned my camera on, faced the lens, and hit record. My name is Ethan Cole. If you're watching this, then you already know the story. But what they're doing in Lone Cedar isn't just about me. It's about every homeowner who who believes that property lines are more than ink. So if they can bury me in paperwork, at least now you'll know why. I uploaded the video before I could second-guess myself. By nightfall, the view count had doubled every hour. My face appeared on news feeds, thumbnails, and reaction videos. Some called me a hero, others a fraud. But for once, the narrative wasn't theirs. Then at 2 a.m., the sound of glass breaking snapped me awake. Downstairs, the front window was shattered. Nothing taken, just broken. On the floor lay one of my own printed maps, half burned, the edges still curling with heat. I didn't call the police. There was no point. I just stood there in the dark, watching smoke drift up from the paper, and thought about what Harlan said about truth being what's recorded. He was wrong, because now the world had already seen it. They built their empire on silence, but silence doesn't last once the truth finds a signal. And tonight, Lone Cedar was finally online.
It was the kind of night when every sound felt louder than it should. The crickets had gone quiet, the air thick and unmoving. After the window shattered the night before, I'd nailed plywood over the frame and told myself it would hold until morning. It didn't make the house feel safer, just smaller. I'd fallen asleep on the couch, TV still on, the news looping coverage of my video. Words like whistleblower and community corruption scrolled across the bottom of the screen until my eyes blurred. I remember thinking I'd won something, though I wasn't sure what. Then came the noise. Soft. Precise. Not glass this time. Metal on metal. A lock turning that shouldn't have turned. Every nerve in my body woke before my mind did. I sat up, heart hammering. The hall light I'd left on was out. Only the TV glow painted the walls, flickering across the living room like lightning caught in a jar. I heard the hinge groan from the kitchen door, slow and careful. Someone was inside. I didn't move, just listened. Footsteps. 2 sets. One heavier, one light. They moved without hesitation, like they'd already mapped the house. From the couch, I could see the outline of my laptop still open on the desk. I'd hidden the flash drive elsewhere, the attic vent, but whoever they were, they'd come for it. The taller shadow reached the desk first. A flashlight beam flicked on, narrow and cold. Papers shuffled, a drawer opened, then shut. No talking. Just the efficiency of people who had done this before. The smaller figure moved toward the hallway, toward the bedrooms. My heartbeat filled my ears. I reached for the phone, but the screen stayed black. Power was out again. That's when I realized the outage wasn't an accident. I stayed low, crept behind the counter, every step measured. I wasn't brave, just angry enough to move. When the light from the flashlight swung toward me, I froze. It swept past, resting on the wall where my framed survey license hung. The taller one stopped. I heard a low voice, muffled by something, maybe a mask. "Leave it," the other whispered. "We just need the copy." They moved faster now, drawers opening, cabinets slamming. One of them went to the breaker panel in the laundry room. Metal clicked. The refrigerator compressor kicked back on, flooding the kitchen with its low hum. Power restored. It was timed, deliberate. They'd cut the circuit to keep alarms quiet, then turned it back to reset before leaving. When the back door opened again, a gust of night air brushed through the house. I waited until I heard the hinge close, then counted to 60 before standing. The place looked like it had been ransacked by someone who respected order. Nothing broken, nothing taken at random, just absence where things used to be. My file cabinet was open, folders missing. The envelope Rosa had given me was gone. But the flash drive was still in the attic vent, taped under insulation. They hadn't found that. Not yet. I stood in the doorway staring at the plywood over the window. The air outside smelled faintly of exhaust and rain that never came. Down the street, a pair of headlights idled too long before pulling away.
In the floor near the desk, something glinted under the lamplight. A business card, half soaked from a spilled glass of water. Harlan and Associates, P.C. On the back, one handwritten line. Stop digging. My throat went dry. They hadn't just broken in. They wanted me to know they'd been here. I took photos of everything. Prints, scratches near the lock, the card. Then sat at the table, lights off, waiting for dawn. My reflection in the window looked like someone I didn't recognize. Hollow eyes, jaw tight. Patience gone. The sun came slow, turning the plywood amber around the edges. Birds started again, pretending nothing had happened. I went outside and found fresh tire tracks cutting through the dew on the curb, stopping right at my mailbox. Inside was another notice. Not from the HOA this time, but the county. Notice of violation, unauthorized structure modification. The plywood patch over the broken window was unsightly, subject to fine. I laughed then. Quiet. Bitter. They were turning the law into a leash, tightening it, inch by inch. I drove straight to Rosa's apartment, but her door was locked and mail piled up beneath it. Her phone went to voicemail. For a moment, I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? That the same people writing the tickets were breaking into homes at night? By the time I got home, my front yard was empty except for a new sign stuck in the grass. Lone Cedar, maintaining community standards. Brand new. Still gleaming. It hadn't been there yesterday. They call it enforcement. I call it a warning. Every lock they break, every rule they twist, it's not about property anymore. It's about control. And now I know they won't stop until I do.
Morning came slow and pale, the kind of Texas light that bleaches everything it touches. I hadn't really slept since the break-in, just drifted between thoughts and the hum of the refrigerator. When I finally stepped outside, the neighborhood looked too clean, too quiet. Across the street, Mrs. Halloran's curtains were still drawn. The grass in her yard, usually cut sharp as carpet, had gone high enough to sway in the breeze. A week ago, she'd signaled me from that porch light. Now it looked like nobody lived there. I crossed the road. Her mailbox hung open, stuffed with flyers and 2 official envelopes stamped "Return to Sender." I knocked once, nothing. Knocked again, harder. The sound echoed back like the house itself was hollow. That's when I heard the engine. An HOA maintenance truck pulling up behind me. 2 men climbed out in reflective vests, the kind the board liked to call community care. One carried a clipboard, the other a crowbar. "Morning," I said. "You with maintenance?" The clipboard man nodded, eyes down. "Routine cleanout. Property's been vacated." "By who?" He flipped a page. "Owner relinquished rights. Transfer approved yesterday." "That's impossible," I said. "She's lived here since before the subdivision had sidewalks." He shrugged. "Paperwork says otherwise." They started hauling boxes from the porch, neat stacks, labels already printed. "Personal effects, storage lot 3. I recognized the handwriting on one of the tags. Not hers. Linda's. "Wait," I said, stepping closer. "Where are you taking this stuff?" The second man kept working. "Storage until resale." "Resale?" The clipboard man looked up for the first time, expression flat. "Sir, please step back. You're trespassing." The word hit like a slap. I almost laughed at the irony. They loaded the boxes, locked the tailgate, and drove off without another word. Dust hung in the air long after they were gone. I stood there staring at the empty porch. The welcome mat she'd always kept straight was gone. Only the imprint of it remained, a rectangle of clean concrete surrounded by dirt. Something white caught my eye near the side gate. An envelope wedged between the boards, edges frayed from wind. I pulled it free. Inside was a folded HOA letterhead form, property transfer, lot vacated. Signed at the bottom, LP, dated 2 days ago. I checked the signature again, Linda Prescott. The ink wasn't printed, it was penned, smooth and deliberate. There was no forwarding address, no note from Mrs. Halloran, just a line that read, Property relocated per Compliance Clause 7. Clause 7. I'd read it before. It allowed the board to reassign properties deemed abandoned in the interest of community appearance. But abandonment required 90 days without contact. It had barely been 1 week. I went around back. Her garden beds were dry, wilted. The ceramic frog she kept by the hose was cracked in half. Near the fence line, the earth looked disturbed. Fresh soil, uneven, like someone had dug and refilled too quickly. I crouched down, brushed my hand over it. Plastic glinted beneath the dirt. A piece of a tag. Maintenance Zone C7. Same numbering system as the HOA work orders. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. A man's voice, low, clipped. You shouldn't be there. Who is this? You already know. The line went dead. I stayed there for a long minute, phone still against my ear, the sound of wind pressing through the fence boards. When I finally stood, I noticed the new sign planted near the curb. For sale by Prescott Development. It hadn't been there this morning. The paint was still drying. Back at my house, I checked the video doorbell footage from the night before. Between 2 and 4 a.m., the feed went black for exactly 19 minutes. When it came back, a faint shape crossed the street carrying a box, the same box I'd seen on the truck. They'd cleaned her out before dawn, paperwork already signed. I opened my laptop and searched county records. The ownership field for her lot now read Prescott Holdings LLC. Date of transfer? Yesterday. No mention of her name, no forwarding notice. It was as if she'd never existed. I closed the screen and sat there in the half-light, listening to the hum of the air vent and the far-off bark of a dog. In Lone Cedar, they don't evict you, they erase you. One line in a ledger, one clause in a charter, and suddenly the house you built your life in belongs to someone else. I looked back at her porch across the street, now bare and silent. The wind caught a loose shutter, tapping it against the siding in a slow, steady rhythm. It sounded like a heartbeat, fading.
I used to think silence was peace. Now I know it's just the sound right before something breaks. The morning after they took Mrs. Halloran's house, Lone Cedar looked brighter than ever. Freshly cut lawns, HOA flags straightened on every porch. Even the air smelled cleaner, like they had sprayed it with something new. Order restored, on the surface at least. My mailbox was full again. 3 envelopes this time, all stamped with the HOA seal. The first was a notice of lien, claiming unpaid fines and community damage costs. The second, a restraining order, barring me from HOA property and meetings. And the third, an invoice for legal counsel fees incurred by association defense. They were charging me for suing myself. I tore them open on the porch, each page heavier than the last. It didn't matter that half of it was fabricated. In Lone Cedar, paperwork was gospel. By noon, my bank app showed a frozen balance, a red banner across the top, hold for pending litigation. I called the bank, but the rep just repeated that a community injunction had been filed against my account. We're required to comply, sir. It's automatic. Automatic. That word again. The machine didn't even know what it was doing. It just followed orders. That afternoon, I went for a walk through the neighborhood. A few doors opened, then closed again. Curtains shifted. A couple I used to chat with by the mailbox crossed to the other side of the street without a word. Near the playground, a new sign hung from the fence. Protect lone cedar from defamation. Stand with your HOA. Someone had spray painted my initials beneath it in red. EC equals liar. The same people who once borrowed my ladder now wouldn't meet my eyes. Back home, there was a flyer wedged in my doorframe. Community alert. Unverified social media claims by resident Ethan Cole. Please disregard misinformation. Beneath it, a quote from the HOA charter. Truth is verified by process. They turned bureaucracy into religion. Around dusk, a delivery driver pulled up. Old pickup, no logo. He handed me a small padded envelope, no return address. You're Ethan Cole, right? Who sent this? He shrugged. Got paid cash to drop it off. Said it was important. Inside was a USB stick and a single note. Not all of us are blind. I didn't plug it in right away. Just held it, trying to decide if it was a trap or a lifeline. While I hesitated, my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. This time, it was Linda Prescott's voice, smooth as always. Mr. Cole, she said, I wanted to extend a courtesy call. The board voted today to expedite your removal. It's nothing personal. It's procedural. Removal? She tightened. Relocating you. I laughed. Like you did Mrs. Holleran? Her tone didn't change. I advise you not to repeat unfounded rumors, Mr. Cole. They tend to age poorly in court. The line went dead. I stood there for a long time, the phone still warm against my ear. Then I turned toward the kitchen, plugged in the USB, and waited. The files opened into grainy footage, security camera clips from the HOA's own clubhouse. Each timestamp lined up with dates I remembered. The night of my hearing, the night of the fire, even the night Mrs. Holleran vanished. In one frame, Harlan and Linda stood beside a shredder, feeding papers marked property transfer. In another, two men loaded boxes into the same maintenance truck I'd seen at her house. The last clip froze on a still frame, a timestamp from 2:16 a.m., the night of my break-in. Two figures entering my yard, the flashlight beam cutting through the dark. The same movement I'd watched from my couch. But the angle, it wasn't from my house. It was from across the street, from Mrs. Holler's old window. Someone had been recording everything. I copied the files, encrypted them, and backed them up. The first time I'd leaked proof, I'd gone public and the board buried me under paper. This time, I'd wait, build it, protect it. Outside, a car idled at the curb for a few minutes before driving off. Headlights swept the porch, paused, then disappeared. Later that night, I found an envelope taped to my door. Inside, a court subpoena, but the header wasn't from the HOA. It was from the Texas Attorney General's office. At the bottom, a handwritten note. We saw your video. Don't go anywhere. In Lone Cedar, power hides in plain sight, behind titles, minutes, and bylaws. But every system that protects the guilty eventually leaves a crack for the truth to crawl through. And tonight, I finally saw the light coming in.
The letter from the Attorney General's office looked almost ordinary. Plain envelope, state seal, no drama. I half expected it to vanish when I blinked. For weeks, I'd been swimming upstream through red tape, and now, for the first time, someone on the other side had reached back. The subpoena told me to report to a field office in downtown Austin. I drove there before dawn, when the sky was still gray and the freeway mostly empty. The building was squat and anonymous, the kind that could have been anything: tax office, motor pool, storage. The air inside smelled of printer ink and burnt coffee. A receptionist took my ID, scanned it, and pointed toward a hallway. Room 214. Investigator Lane will meet you. Room 214 was small, cold, fluorescent. A file cabinet hummed against one wall,
and a camera lens blinked red above the door. The hum of the city barely made it through the glass. She walked in 5 minutes later. Tall, maybe late 30s, dark hair tied back, plain blazer, a badge on her belt that said Public Integrity Unit. She moved like someone who'd learned not to waste motion. "Mr. Cole," she said, shaking my hand. "Marisol Lane." "Thanks for reaching out," I said. "You made it easy. Hard not to notice your video." She sat, flipping through a thin folder. "You've stirred a bigger hornet's nest than you realize." "I'm aware," I said. She smiled faintly, not unkindly. "You think you're fighting your HOA. You're not. You're fighting a revenue model." I waited. She slid a photograph across the table. An aerial shot of 3 different developments scattered across Texas: Lone Cedar, Stone Bridge, Pinecrest. She tapped each with her pen. Same developer, same board structure, same lawyer. Harlan. My pulse kicked. They're cloning the setup. Exactly. Each one starts as a legitimate homeowners association. Within a few years, the development company shifts property lines inward, then resells green space parcels for profit. It's legal, technically, if nobody challenges it. And when someone does? She flipped another page. Newspaper clippings. Homeowners who'd moved away. Lawsuits dismissed. Quiet settlements. "You're the first one who didn't take the buyout." "They offered me money," I said. "I know." She looked up, eyes steady. "You didn't take it. That's why you're still standing." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The ceiling light buzzed overhead like a trapped fly. "Why now?" I asked. "You've known about this for a while." She leaned back. "We needed a trigger. The leak made it public enough that I can investigate without it being buried." She opened a folder marked Evidence Intake. "You still have the original data?" I nodded. "Off the grid. 2 copies." "Good. Don't bring them here. If our system gets subpoenaed, they'll vanish before lunch." "You think there's a leak inside the AG's office?" She didn't answer right away. "Let's say Prescott's influence runs deep. People like Harlan don't build fences, they build networks." She reached into her bag and set a sealed plastic pouch on the table. Inside was a small black envelope and a prepaid courier label. "If anything happens, I mean anything, you mail this. It's pre-addressed to an independent journalist in Dallas. It'll finish what you started." I stared at the envelope. "What's in it?" "Names," she said. "Contracts. Enough to get attention where it hurts." I nodded, feeling the weight of it before I even picked it up. She watched me for a moment, then said, "I know what this is doing to you. The isolation, the threats. They want you to make a mistake, lose your credibility." "Too late for that," I said. Her expression softened, just slightly. "No, not yet." She closed the folder, stood, and opened the door. "We'll be in touch soon, but if you see unmarked sedans near your house, assume they're not mine." Outside, the sun had climbed high enough to turn the glass towers into mirrors. I caught my reflection in one of them. Smaller, thinner, eyes hollow from too many nights awake. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize myself. On the drive home, I saw a black SUV in my rearview mirror. It stayed 3 car lengths back all the way to Lone Cedar. When I turned onto my street, it slowed, then kept going past the gate. At my porch, I found another envelope tucked under the welcome mat. Inside was a single typed line. "You don't know who you're talking to." I looked up. Across the street, Mrs. Holleran's empty house stared back. Dark windows, for sale sign tilting in the wind. The thing about digging for truth is, sooner or later you hit bedrock, and that's where the real monsters live. But now the state's watching, and if they're watching me, maybe they'll see what's been hiding here all along.
The text thread with Rosa ended mid-sentence. Tuesday, 11:43 p.m. Meeting went weird. We'll call tomorrow. That was 2 days ago. Since then, silence. Calls went straight to voicemail. Messages showed delivered but unread. By Thursday morning, I was back on I-35. Windows down, the Texas heat pushing through like static. Her apartment complex sat behind a faded strip mall in South Austin. 2 stories, stucco walls, the smell of fried food drifting from the taco stand across the street. Nothing about it looked dangerous, but danger never looks like what it is until you're inside it. The front door was locked. I buzzed the manager, showed my ID, said I was a friend checking on her. He gave me the once-over, then sighed. Miss Vega moved out yesterday. Said she got a new job out of state. Did she tell you where? He shook his head. Left the keys, paid the rest of the month in cash. Did anyone come with her? Couple of men in suits. State badges, maybe. Thought they were from her office. State badges. My stomach tightened. He handed me a small envelope. She asked me to give this to you if you showed up. Inside was a single sticky note. Trust the numbers, not the names. Nothing else. I thanked him, waited until he disappeared back inside, then walked to the stairwell. Her apartment door was still marked 2B, brass number loose. I used a small screwdriver from my truck to slip the latch. The lock turned too easily, like it had already been opened. The place smelled of bleach. The curtains were gone, the drawers half open, a single chair stood in the corner beside a coffee cup still half full. Dust patterns on the table showed where things had been, a laptop, maybe 2 phones. The outlet strip was still warm. Whoever cleaned this place didn't care about appearances. They cared about erasure. I crouched near the table, found a torn piece of printer paper wedged behind it, a fragment of a spreadsheet. 1-column heading still visible. Parcel Reassignment, Phase 3. The date stamp at the bottom was yesterday. She'd still been working on it, right up until she vanished. Back in the truck, I called Marisol Lane. She answered on the first ring. I was about to call you. I said, Rose is gone. I know. Her Access badge was deactivated this morning. HR says she resigned. Did she? No. Her personnel file's sealed. That only happens under 2 conditions, death or federal transfer. I checked both. Nothing. I told her about the men with badges, the note, the cleaned-out apartment. Lane was quiet for a long moment. Listen to me. Whatever she found in those spreadsheets, that's what they're after. They've already purged her name from the system. As far as the database is concerned, there was never a Rosa Vega employed by the state. I pulled over, gripping the wheel hard enough that the plastic creaked. They're rewriting people now? They've been doing it for years. You just finally noticed. Static crackled on the line. Lane, you still there? Her voice came faint through the distortion. Be careful who you contact. Someone in my department is feeding them updates. And Ethan, don't come back to Austin for a while. The call dropped. The sun was setting by the time I reached Lone Cedar. The neighborhood looked frozen in gold light, every lawn perfectly symmetrical. On Mrs. Halloran's porch, the new owner's sign gleamed. Sold. The nameplate read, Prescott Holdings, LLC. I went inside, poured water into a glass, and sat at the table staring at the sticky note. Trust the numbers, not the names. On impulse, I reopened my backup of the leak, the master folder Rosa had helped me build. I scrolled through file metadata, timestamps, digital signatures. Every mention of R. Vega was gone. The signature block now read, System Admin Unassigned. Even the email threads where she'd written me had new sender IDs, nonsensical strings of numbers. But something didn't add up. The log entries were sequential, until one gap, a missing 20-minute window, on the night of the fire. That's when she'd copied the cache to give me the flash drive. I clicked open the next surviving entry. User 4 update. Boundary asset replication complete. Attached was a coordinate string, latitudes, longitudes. I copied it into a map. The pin dropped in the middle of nowhere, south of the city limits. A construction yard, presumably abandoned. The kind of place where you could hide trucks, records, maybe people. The glass trembled in my hand. My phone buzzed. One text, no contact name, just a number I didn't recognize. If you go there, don't go alone. I set the phone down and looked out the window. The streetlights had come on, humming softly. Across the road, that same black SUV from before had returned, engine off. Just sitting there. Rosa warned me to trust the numbers. Maybe she knew the rest of us were already erased from the record. And if they can delete a name, deleting a man won't take much more work.
The coordinates led me down a 2-lane road south of the city, past fields that hadn't seen rain in months. The sky hung low and orange, the kind of dusk that makes distance look like heat shimmer. My GPS showed nothing but a blank square. No business listing, no address. Just that pin Rosa had left behind. By the time I reached the fence line, the light was gone. The yard lay ahead. Chain-link gate, Prescott Development, authorized personnel only, printed on a rusted sign. Beyond it, rows of half-finished modular homes stretched into the dark. A few floodlights hummed, painting everything in pale sodium yellow. I parked the truck behind a billboard and killed the engine. The night was heavy enough to swallow the sound. The padlock on the gate hung open. No guard, no movement. Just wind pushing dust along the gravel. Someone had been here recently, though. Fresh tire tracks led inside. I slipped through, phone light off, flashlight cupped in my palm. Each step crunched louder than I wanted. Between the rows of houses stood shipping containers, their sides stenciled with codes: LC02, SB07, PC04, Lone Cedar, Stone Bridge, Pinecrest. The 3 communities Lane had shown me. The first container's door was ajar. Inside, stacks of cardboard boxes reached the ceiling. I opened one. Inside, binders. HOA records, thousands of them. Deeds, plats, compliance tickets. Every page stamped, archived, closed. They hadn't destroyed the evidence. They'd warehoused it. I moved deeper into the row. Another container, another set of neighborhoods. The last one was different. Metal crates, sealed with tamper tape, marked legal hold. A small office trailer sat nearby, light flickering inside. I climbed the steps, hand on the knob. It opened without resistance. The hum of a desktop computer filled the room. A monitor showed a live upload window, progress bar crawling forward. At the bottom of the screen, Public Integrity Unit Secure Portal. "Figured you'd come," said a voice behind me. I turned. Marisol Lane stood in the doorway, hair pulled back, badge clipped to her belt. She looked exhausted, like she'd been awake for days. "I traced Rose's coordinates," I said. She sent them to both of us. This was their dump site. Every fake transfer, every doctored map. Lane replied. "She must have copied the database before they shut her out." "So she's alive?" Lane's face hardened. "I don't know, but she made sure this got here." On the desk, a drive blinked green, data flowing line by line. Lane leaned over it, typed a command, and turned the monitor toward me. "It's uploading to 6 mirrored servers. Even if they pull the plug, it'll survive." Outside, an engine roared to life. Headlights swept across the containers. Lane's hand went to her sidearm. "Company," she said quietly.
We killed the lights. Through the window, I saw two SUVs roll up, doors opening in unison. Figures with flashlights fanned out. "How long for the upload?" I whispered. 2 minutes. She handed me a sealed envelope, the same black pouch she'd given me days ago. "If I don't walk out, you mail this." "I'm not leaving." "You might have to." The footsteps drew closer. Flashlights sliced through the dark, beams bouncing off the metal walls. Lane checked the screen again. 97%. A shout outside. "Federal property! Step out now!" Lane met my eyes. "They're not federal." She pulled the drive free, pocketed it, and opened the door just enough to see. The first man approaching wore a suit, not a uniform. Behind him, another I recognized. Greg Harlan. He called out, "You're trespassing, Miss Lane. That's state evidence." She stepped into the light, badge raised. "It's already gone, Greg. Every bite. You can't bury it this time." His smile barely moved. "We'll see." I stayed inside, heart pounding, watching through the blinds as they surrounded her. There was shouting, the flash of a flashlight beam in her face, and then the sound of tires, my truck, peeling away. I didn't remember deciding to move, but I was already in the driver's seat, hitting the dirt road, lights off, the envelope on the dash. Behind me, the yard receded into darkness. Ahead, the first drops of rain began to fall, tapping the windshield like a clock counting down. By the time I reached the highway, my phone vibrated. One message. Unknown number. Upload complete. No signature, no name. Just those 2 words. I slowed, pulled over at the shoulder, and looked back towards the faint glow on the horizon where the yard had been. Sirens echoed, somewhere distant. Maybe Lane had made it out. Maybe she hadn't. But the files were free now. I drove until dawn, until the rain turned the roads silver. When the first news alerts hit my phone, I pulled over to read them. Statewide HOA fraud investigation underway. Attorney General opens probe into Prescott development. My name wasn't in the articles, and that was fine. I'd done what Rosa started. Back in Lone Cedar, the HOA signs were gone. The clubhouse gates chained shut. The neighborhood looked normal again, almost peaceful. I stood in my yard, breathing in the damp air. The ground felt solid under my boots, unmeasured, unclaimed. They built their empire on paper and signatures, on rules that bent to whoever held the pen. But in the end, the land didn't care who owned it. It just waited, for rain, for roots, for someone to stand still long enough to listen. I looked once more at the horizon, the light breaking through the clouds. Then I turned off my phone, locked the door behind me, and walked out into the morning.